thank you everyone for coming today. I will try not to go over anything and try to provide time for questions, but if not, apologies in advance. You can come up to me after the talk if you have any questions and I can't get to them. So I'll be talking about the state of the industry of digital games and some of the insights and trends that we foresee for 2015. So my name is Stephanie Llamas. I am the Senior Analyst of Consumer Insights at Superdata Research. So at Superdata, we provide market intelligence on digital games and playable media. And the way that we're able to do that is we collect data from publishers and developers and identify and analyze trends in the digital space. And specifically, my job is to take the data that we create and to write a story to it, to let people know why they're seeing certain changes in the market and what are the impetuses behind those trends. And we work with a number of different companies, and anywhere from publishers to distributors, media companies, and so on. So to start with, I want to give kind of a background of what we consider digital games to be and what we cover. Basically, we consider them to be any kind of game that you purchase, download, play, or download additional content for on a digital device. So we cover mobile, social, MMO, digital PC, and digital console. And I'll go a little bit more into how we categorize some of those as I get to them. But primarily, mobile is, by and large, the biggest market of all of the digital games markets. It's responsible for 80% of all digital games revenue in 2014. And 43% of that comes from Western markets. And by Western markets, I mean North America and Europe. This is actually declining, this market share that the Western markets have in mobile. But we are seeing revenue still increase, not as quickly as it used to, but overall, 2015 we expect revenues to hit $22.5 billion. And that's a 4% increase from last year. I'm sure that if you've seen mobile data in the past, 4% is not that impressive. In previous years, it's been anywhere from 40 to 150% growth. But if you look, you can kind of see there's a rise at the end of 2014 during the holiday season and post-holiday spending, and then the same rise in 2015. So we're not really seeing those rises change. We're seeing sort of the same ebbs and flows in the market in terms of revenue. So we really don't expect mobile to increase too much in terms of revenue. In terms of audience, we're looking at 2.1 billion MAU, so monthly active users in 2015. And that would actually be a 10% increase over last year. So there's sort of a map that goes with this. If you look at it, it starts with the fact that Western markets are losing market share, which implies obviously that somewhere else market share is growing. The East, obviously. And then with revenue only incrementally rising, but audience rising a little bit quicker, it implies that spending is not matching what it used to be. So new players are joining mobile, and this implies that there are young markets that are joining the mobile space. So we kind of look to emerging smartphone penetration to understand where some of these new entrants are coming from. And we know that Asia is booming and it's popular for mobile, and we get a lot of questions about Asia as a whole, but we generally get questions about China, Japan, South Korea. They're traditionally very strong in mobile over the last couple of years. They're the largest markets. China's enormous, so naturally there would be a lot of interest and there's a lot of investment there. But there are also other areas that are growing, not quite as fast as China or Japan or any of those markets have in the past, but they are growing and they're coming into the fold. So India and Indonesia, for example, are highly populous countries. 2 out of 5 people in Asia live in one of those countries. And India is very quickly approaching the population of China. So we're talking about a whole new, enormous, accessible potential audience. And we're seeing in those two countries specifically that smartphone penetration is finally turning on. It's finally clicking. There was a lot of slow growth in the beginning, but now that there's sort of more accessibility to localized devices, there's just been a huge boom. So we see smartphone penetration in India at 18% for 2014, which doubles the penetration from 2013. And in Indonesia, we see 22%, so 62% growth. So again, these are younger markets. Spending is not as high. They function in terms of sentiment and behavior quite differently from other Asian countries, but there's certainly a point of opportunity in a region where it's fast approaching saturation. In the social realm, on the other hand, there's not quite as much room for growth any longer. So if we look at revenue, the top line is growth rates. We see that there was a huge boom, toward the beginning of social 2011, 2012, and that boom has largely died down. So there's a huge stagnation in social games. We're seeing $8.1 billion in revenue for 2015, which is a 2% increase. It's very, very marginal. And then for audience, we're really also not seeing a lot of growth. There was a huge boom in the beginning, and that boom is basically done. So who's left in social are the dedicated players. So we are seeing the audience growth in terms of units is not quite as strong as revenue. So there is a strong spending player base, but a lot of these players are already on games that they're dedicated to. They could potentially try new games, but it's not quite as ripe a market. So the spending and conversion will increase on social, but we do not expect social to increase in terms of revenue past 2017. In fact, we expect it to start to decline as more and more players move on to other platforms, specifically mobile. Now, when we look at digital PC and digital console, I want to kind of clarify what we mean by those two things. So for PC and console, if you go to a brick and mortar store and you buy a boxed software or a boxed game, then that's considered retail, PC or retail console. These are things that you have to buy up front for a certain price. You can buy additional content later on digitally, but those are retail. Digitally, we look at those upfront full game purchases for full games like Call of Duty or anything that you might buy on Steam, in addition to the additional content downloads. And that goes for both PC and console. And the market share is largely going to North America and Europe, about 80% for both segments. And largely the reason is because if you think about where the most developed nations are, the richest nations are, there's a high concentration in those two regions, and you need expensive hardware to play digital PC and digital console games. So there's still issues of penetration in terms of those hardware in other markets, and those markets have been slow to catch up. But there's a lot of potential in these two markets. So here, this is a graph of the US retail versus digital revenue between 2011 through end of 2014. You can kind of see there's a slow and steady growth of digital. Retail sees huge booms during the holiday season. Those booms are starting to deflate. And so in 2014, if you look at the end of this graph, we see that digital is just under retail for holidays. That's unprecedented. So we really feel confident that this is promising for 2015 to be the year of digital games and digital platforms as more digitally capable devices come into the fold. And so part of this is a result of new consoles, for example, that provide the opportunity to save more games or are faster. And part of this is just the continuous growing PC audience that understands the ease of access of digital downloads over retail. And so MMOs are sort of a different animal that we look at. It's one of the fastest growing markets in digital games for sure. And it's largely a result of the huge boom in MOBAs, in massive online battle arena games. And the growth also of the transition, rather, of pay-to-play games to a hybrid model where there are games that were traditionally subscription-based that incorporated free-to-play monetization mechanics and became hybrid. So in terms of MOBAs, League of Legends is certainly the most popular, and I kind of want to go into what it is about a MOBA that we consider makes it an MMO over, say, digital PC or some other genre. And so they function similarly to games with lobbies, and that makes them a little bit different from a persistent world that you commonly see in MMOs. But in terms of the inherent mechanics, they are multiplayer, they are online, and there's no getting away from that. You can't play unless you are both those things. And those really speak to the MMO genre. And also massive too. So in terms of League of Legends, that game actually requires a lot of volume for proper matchmaking. And so we're seeing over 70 million monthly active users currently for the game, which is quite astounding. So it's an enormous game, and MOBAs in general, or rather a few MOBAs in general, are doing quite well in MMOs. And so if we look at free-to-play versus subscription is quite underwhelming, and it's been this way for a couple of years. It's continuing to decline, and it's not going to come back. So over the last year, there's been a 4% decrease, rather. And part of this is because World of Warcraft is very good at taking the space. But part of it is because there are a lot of publishers that realize the value of free-to-play monetization mechanics and are moving over to the hybrid model that I mentioned before. And so free-to-play is really gaining from these changes. In 2014, revenues reached $8 billion worldwide, and in 2015 we expect them to reach over $9 billion with a 12% increase year over year. So that's quite fast growth for the digital market at this time in terms of the other segments in digital games. So if we look at the top 10 grossing MMOs for 2014, the first thing is there are only 2 subscription-based MMOs on this list, and World of Warcraft continues to just kind of dominate the space and stay up high. It does have a decline, but it's very slow, and we anticipate it'll continue to be slow. It has a very dedicated player base. So I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon, but the rest of them are free to play, except for Lineage also. And then 2 of those free-to-play games are MOBAs. And what's surprising about that is that there are 3 games that really dominate the space, and 2 of which are grossing higher than well-established MMOs in both the free-to-play and subscription-based markets. So League of Legends is the highest grossing MMO at this time for 2014. And Dota 2 also makes the list. They're both doing really, really well. And in addition to Smite, the 3 of them account for more than 70% of all MOBA revenues currently. So it's a tight space. There are just a few games that are really controlling it, but it's growing quickly. So if we look at how it's grown in the last year, from 2013 to 2014, we do see a shift. This is the market share of MOBA in terms of free-to-play MMOs. And market share increased 8% year over year, quite a bit, taking over well-established genres like first-person shooters, RPGs in the space. In addition, revenue has increased 74% for MOBAs year over year. It's huge growth. So going back to my previous example with League of Legends, there's something really unique about what they do, and a lot of that is the facilitation of their community. And in MMOs, that tends to be a really valuable strategy. And so one of the things that they've done really, really well is esports. And so League of Legends in their World Championships for 2014, they had 27 million unique viewers streaming the the broadcast, and 40,000 attendees. So they filled up the Seoul World Cup stadium in South Korea. It was enormous, and it was actually slightly smaller in terms of viewers than it was the year before, but just slightly. So it's still going really strong. Viewership was sustained longer this time around, so a lot of dedicated players were watching. And so this kind of facilitation of community and giving back by providing alternative entertainment around their game has proven really effective for them and for other esports in the market. And so MOBAs right now are one of the largest genres in esports, but their popularity is fueling a rise in other genres. So we're seeing Call of Duty, first-person shooters like Call of Duty and World of Tanks come into the fold and get more and more popular. And traditionally niche genres in esports like fighting games are also beginning to creep back up. So that's really exciting for esports. And a lot of that is due to the fact that streaming has become so incredibly popular and easy. Really, it comes down to the ease of access. So with broadcast networks like Twitch or MLG, we're seeing a huge rise in viewers. And in 2015, we expect unique viewers for streaming to increase to 134 million viewers. And prize money, likewise, has gone up. There's a lot more value in these competitions and a lot more competitions coming into esports. So that all makes it really exciting for new viewers, but also really engaging for the viewers that have already stuck around. And so the ease of streaming has leveraged the opportunity for digital growth, and so have a number of other things. So, as I mentioned before, the ubiquity of certain digital devices, the fact that smartphones are penetrating more widely, and that now we're seeing digital devices that have capabilities that are far beyond what we could have imagined before, like the new generation of consoles and a lot of these new custom PCs that run incredibly fast. So this brings so much innovation to the digital space. It kind of gives light to alternative devices as well. And one area that we're looking at, and we're looking at with a lot of interest, is virtual reality. So this is sort of a timeline of the devices that have already come out or will come out this year. It's just to give you an idea of volume, but these are just a handful of the dozen of VR devices that have been announced. So there's quite a bit of hardware that's coming into the market, looking for software developers and looking for people who are willing to be pioneers in this market. And we estimate that by spring of 2016, the install base for VR devices will be almost 10 million. And so that's quite a big jump for the beginning of a new device that has long promised immersive, interactive entertainment and has fallen short. Because this time around, it's not the same VR that we remember from when we were kids and we would go to an arcade or anything like that. These are the real thing. And so there are a lot of companies that recognize that. We're starting to also see a lot of investment. So there are a number of VR companies that are gaining quite a bit of investment from that are raising a lot of investment. So in terms of the largest we know of is Oculus. They had a quite famous acquisition with Facebook earlier in 2014 for $2 billion. And Magic Leap, which we are pretty sure is an augmented or virtual reality company, but it's very cryptic. They don't talk a lot about what they do. Google seems to know what they do and is excited about it, and that $550 million comes from them. So there are really big interactive media companies that recognize the potential of VR and are excited about it and are looking to invest. And so it's going to be difficult to incorporate, for example, long form video to VR just because of the technological setbacks that we're still encountering. It's really hard to give a virtual reality experience with a live action video. But games, although there are definitely hurdles, provide a way to showcase VR in a way that's accessible and a bit easier than some of the traditional media that a lot of people predict will be the first to VR. I don't think so. Super Data doesn't think so. We think games are going to be the pioneers of that. So going back to digital games, we're finally reaching a point of critical mass. It's really exciting in the industry, and although a lot of these markets are beginning to stagnate in terms of growth, it's exciting to know that there's so much volume and that there's still so much potential. So part of this is a result of the innovation that I mentioned with certain devices that have already come to fruition, as well as the added ubiquity of localizing those devices. So bringing smartphones to areas that had difficulty accessing them before. Unfortunately, there are other regions that still have those difficulties. So Brazil no longer has a couple of their localized hardware console manufacturers, and that's a shame, but hopefully these will continue to develop in terms of innovation and access. And now that we have such a digitally capable catalog of devices, and the potential is so widespread for access and penetration, 2015 will really begin to take us to the next step and be the year of enhanced playable media. So we really believe that playable media such as these peripherals like virtual reality or streaming services that are parallel to the gaming industry and support it but are not games are sort of the next step in terms of the digital games market. So streaming, innovation, alternative peripherals, that's what we'll see this year. And that is my presentation, so thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. If we could open it up for questions, I think we might be able to take one or two in. Do we have any? I think we have one over here. If there's a microphone coming. Could you hold on one moment? There's a microphone coming so we can record this on video.
Hi. When it comes to VR devices, that the install base will be 10 million, is that mostly looking at North America?
No, it's worldwide.
It's worldwide.
I mean, North America will be the crux of that, certainly. But it goes cross-platform, too. It's not just VR devices for PC or console. There's also a number of mobile devices as well.
I see. And when it comes to the esports, is that, it sounds like an American thing, but it probably is not if they're filling out an entire stadium in Seoul, right? Right.
It actually has long been very popular in South Korea, far before in the United States. So the Western markets are actually playing catch-up right now with South Korea and some of the Eastern markets because esports has been on the horizon over there, but just for some reason it didn't catch on until recently here.
But it looks like it is going to catch on?
Oh, absolutely.
With a pretty fair degree of veracity?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Jim?
How do you think the consoles are going to do in China? Both the Sony and Microsoft, and then the ones that are China-specific, like GU360?
There are quite a few China-specific consoles, which is generally, I think, the issue in China is fragmentation and a wide variety of different hardware or software options. So on the one hand, I mean, I think those consoles will do well overall, but it will be difficult to see which ones are pulling ahead just because there are quite a few. And micro consoles are coming to China right now. So even though they haven't seen success on this side of the world, you know, I don't know, maybe China is a better market for that sort of thing, but there are quite a few of them in the market. So in terms of the localized devices, I think that they will take off. It's just it's just difficult to gauge which ones or how. But in terms of Sony and Microsoft, you know, Xbox, PlayStation, I don't think that it's going to be a huge market for that. I mean, volume, the volume is there, and so even if it's a small percentage, there's a lot of people that are participating, but China's traditionally not been huge on the front of consoles. So I just don't think that that's going to continue, especially with the quality and the catalog of social mobile games that are out there.
Yeah, I read some research about that where the initial launch for Xbox in China was really great. They sold like 100,000 units, but it's tailed off since then.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, and whoever was interested, you know, they already bought it. So most most people that could or wanted to, they're already part of the network, and it's not really going to expand past that, I don't think.
Great. Thank you very much, Stephanie.
Great,
That's
thank you.
fascinating.